The moment of truth in mental toughness is when your emotional state, okay, is trying to take you one direction, and what's required needs to take you in a different direction.
When it comes to peak performance, my guest today is one of the very few people I trust to tell me about my body. I know what my body's doing, but he also is so well schooled and has been around it so much and understands it from an interoceptive, from an outside perspective, as a coach and as a mindset expert, that I trust him to tell me how to heal, how to get better, how to improve, and how to improve my peak performance. He is a fantastic coach, one of my favorite people in the world, and as good as he is as a coach, he is a better human being. Today, we're going to talk about peak performance and about peak performance mindsets with one of the best in the business, Mike Blasquez, Associate Athletic Director and the dude in charge of peak performance at the University of California, Berkeley. It's coming up right now. Great day, everyone. I'm Mike Pawlawski, former world champion quarterback, serial entrepreneur, and award-winning TV producer and host. I've lived a life dedicated to mastery through performance and mindset integration. Each week, I'll bring you the insights, strategies, and stories from some of the world's top performers to help you unlock your greatness. Whether you're an athlete aiming for the top or an executive driving your team to victory, this is where you learn how to train your greatness to become an everyday great. Now let's get after it. Welcome to the show, big dog.
Oh man, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate that intro, and so many good talks over all these years, and excited to have the conversation.
So one of the things that I love, and people, when we talk, they want to see the high level, the college athletics and all of that. But one of your biggest things, and then the thing that I think is amazing, is you were part of the streak at De La Salle. And when people think of De La Salle, it has the big name now, but prior to the streak, it didn't have the big name. And they still only have the assets of a well-funded high school, but just a high school. It's not like college. And so you guys, with you and Coach Ladd and Terry and the whole crew and, everybody there, were able to do that in that environment. Talk to me about how that was as a coach and what you guys built there.
No, thank you. Yeah, I'd probably start with saying that some of the best times in my career, probably the greatest time in my career, I think, was going through that experience at De La Salle. And yeah, we were cutting our teeth. Honestly, I was a young coach, early 20s, and they had definitely had some success at the local level, and were considered a successful program, and maybe one of the top programs in the Bay Area when I was introduced and I started working there. But man, we were just really scratching the surface. And I jump in as a young coach, and I'm teaching, and I'm working as an athletic trainer. I've got background in sports medicine and strength and conditioning, and was kind of doing that, in both those worlds for De La Salle when I started. And but really, there wasn't a great model for any of it. We were, one of the first high schools for sure in the Bay Area that actually had a strength and conditioning coach that was working with the team on a daily basis. That was a full staffer, if you will, and maybe even one of the first full-time sports medicine employees at the high school level. So we were doing things, and there's just no good model for it. So, coming in and then determining what the situation and what the program required to move forward, it was all new, man. We were writing a new chapter every year, but it was an unbelievable experience. And I think you hit the nail on the head. De La Salle at that time, if you walk into their facilities, you would have been shocked. You walk on their field had this huge crown to it. Potholes, and man, any rain and you were in, 6 inches of mud, a dirt track, a weight room the size of a wrestling mat room with a universal machine and some of the old concrete, plastic covered concrete weights, and, one small basketball gym. And, it was just very, very modest, but with Bob Lashley there, it was an unbelievable culture that was being established. And, that's what drew me there, is getting an opportunity to meet with Bob and Terry Edson and the staff that was there. And I just felt like, man, this is going to be a great fit. Really, these people really want to grow. They want to get better. There's this quest for excellence that's here. And it wasn't just in the athletic department. It was really the institution itself that really kind of drove that thinking. And I felt like, no, this is a good place for me. And so I found myself there embarking on that journey with them.
What got you, like, what drove you to coach? What was your passion that gets you to coach? Because I know you, so I know what drives you. Like, we talk about our kids and we talk about training athletes. We train dogs together. Like, you love to teach and you love to see improvement, everything that you do. But from your internals, what drove you to coach?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's definitely something that I found inside of me early that I really enjoyed bringing people along. That I enjoyed helping people. I also grew up in a family. My mom's a teacher, and she started as an elementary school teacher, worked herself to principal, eventually a PhD in education and superintendent, overseeing multiple schools and high schools and hiring staff. And so I think it was a little bit of my blood, being a teacher. And I think that teaching and coaching are the same thing. And in fact, a funny story, first day, go in, interview out of De La Salle, and I meet the great Bob Lattiser, and we have a great talk, and kind of finish up the conversation with the interview. And I thought things were going pretty well. And he looked at me and he said, you plan on teaching, right? And I said, well, coach, coming in to help you out with the sports med, and and then I've got the strength conditioning background. Really hadn't thought about teaching, at that time. And he said, well, listen, you can't teach, you can't coach. And then he stood up and he walked out of the room. And so I sat there by myself for a minute, and eventually got up and got out of there. And I'd met Terry Edson prior to that. And so I went back and I found him and I said, hey, I met Bob. I felt like things were pretty good, but he said, if you don't teach, you can't coach. And he said, no, that's not what he meant. He said, what he meant is that you're not a good teacher, you're never going to be a good coach. Right. But what he really meant was you need to learn how to teach. And so to get in here at De La Salle and become a teacher, right, and become good at that craft, it will help you become a better coach. And I did. I took his advice and began teaching right away. At De La Salle, year one, I was teaching health in a sports medicine class, and to this day, I credit some of that, some of what I've learned in the classroom on how to be a good teacher, how to connect with your students the right way, both on subject matter topic as well as personally. And those are some of the key pieces, the foundation, for coaching as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, those are great experiences for me. I think probably what drove me into the whole thing, into wanting to be competitive, wanting to be in a competitive environment from the beginning, was that as a kid, I was pretty undersized. And growing up, high school, I was like one of the smallest guys in my class. I always felt like, I was a little behind. I was, early on, I wasn't, I came from a different feeder program for my high school. I went to a Catholic high school, so I didn't come out of the Catholic system. I came out of the public system into a Catholic system, and I got there, no one knew me, and undersized kid, not getting picked on teams, and so I immediately kind of fell into this competitive mindset. How do I get ahead? I'm not good with this, and so I think that those early feelings of just being behind and not good enough in the areas I wanted to be, and having to prove myself, and then going through that, and kind of developing that competitive mindset that helped me to work through that, kind of drove me to want to help others in the same way. And so I think that was kind of the initial driver for me getting into this business, and probably, looking at both athletic training and sports med and strength and conditioning as a medium to do that.
That is great. I go on a walk every morning, right? And do a little kind of thoughtful walk and a little meditation this morning. And a phrase popped into my head, which is perfect kind of for today, what we just talked about. in that when you try to help people, I like to think of it, people talk about service to others and helping other people, which is great, and giving back. I like to think of it as a champion. And you're championing people who kind of mirror to you your former self. And so you, as an undersized guy with those athletes out there, you were being their champion to help them improve, to help them get bigger, stronger, faster, to get that competitive edge. And the thought that popped into my head is, as their champion, you swing the sword that would slay the demon that you faced when you were younger, right? So you're fighting that same battle with them that you fought for yourself, but you're there to champion them. I just think that's a great message for kind of young players, in that once you overcome these things, you're best suited to help those people that are in the same position you started at. And
Right.
so I love that in your story, because you do love to give back. Now, not to kind of pigeonhole you as just a high school guy at De La Salle.
Right,
You've trained some dudes now. So talk me through, if you don't mind dropping a few names here, some of the dudes that you've trained who have gone on to great things in professional sports.
No, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. First, I've been fortunate in the last 20 years to be here at UC Berkeley in the athletic department and overseeing the department. So, we have 30 sports that compete, some with great deals of success and some with limited success and varying over the last 20 years. I spent most of my time the last 12 years or so with our football and baseball team, and prior to that with our men's basketball team. And so I've had the opportunity to work with some just unbelievable athletes at Cal in those programs as their coach. And then I've been fortunate to work with several of those athletes who have gone on to compete and play at the next level. Particularly a lot of the NFL players that I worked with, starting with some way back at De La Salle that I worked with for their time at De La Salle, the time they were in college, and then right through their entire careers in the NFL. And the one that stand out there would be Maurice Jones-Drew, who's now coaching out at De La Salle, giving back to that
Right.
program. But Maurice and I spent, 12 years, together in the weight rooms, coaching from the time he was 16 years old till he retired from the NFL. But I think when I first got to Cal, he was probably the first NFL player that kind of walked in the door when I was at Cal, and I was at that time doing men's basketball. But I mean, there's maybe 20 guys, 25, 30 guys that have come through since then. The latest guys that I'm working with now are some of the guys that were at Cal, and Coin Dang is in 1 year is with Chicago, and Elijah Hicks also with Chicago, and then Ashton Davis with the Jets are all back, and they're all training. We've got our sessions the last couple of days, another one this morning with those guys. And you all probably remember Kelechi Asmeli, offensive lineman, 10-year pro. I spent a lot of time with him last year, working with him. Unbelievable guy, incredible work ethic. I mean, just amazing to see what he's willing to do to his body every day to prepare. But I've been fortunate to be on the NFL guys that have come back over all the years. And I mean, I've had a lot of them from, Rod Streeter, Seth Roberts, Julian Edelman. I mean, we've had a lot of guys come through and train, 1, 2, 3, 4 years, for whatever reason they're in the area or they want to come back and train with me. It's been a lot of fun working with those guys. And you really get to see beyond their physical ability what got them to the place where they are and what's keeping them there. I'll tell you, beyond some of the NFL players, I've been really fortunate over the last probably 10 years to get have some interactions with some of the boxers, professional boxers, and that's been a lot of fun. Started with Amir Khan, Andre Berto, and Tony Yoka. These guys are all pay-per-view fighters. They trade.
And now you want to talk about a sport where your conditioning is super imperative that you be at the peak of your conditioning. Boxing is it.
No doubt. And from a mental standpoint, it's just fascinating to me. These guys are standing out there, and I mean, you're one-on-one, and and you're in a full-on battle with another human being, and just what they do to prepare is unbelievable. Probably the most exciting period was when I was training with Andre Ward, and I'm not sure if you know, Andre Ward was just he just was entered the Hall of Fame for boxing this year. It's pretty incredible and then I think also the Bay Area Hall of Fame. But fortunate to get a chance to spend a lot of time with Andre and go watch him fight and watch him prepare, and a lot of good stuff with Andre. So just some of the boxers have been incredible. Some of the baseball players, we had Andrew Vaughn a couple of years ago, coached him for 3 years here, Golden Spikes winner, so best player in college baseball. It's been a good experience. Just getting a chance to work with some great people.
And the list goes on and on and on. One of my favorite guys, Justin Forsett. I know Justin used to come back and work with you as well. Just a fantastic human being. His story is amazing, and we're going to have Justin on as well. But just because these guys knew, they knew that they were going to get in better shape, better prepared, coming back to work with you than if they stayed with their team, if they stayed where they were. And so you're pretty humble about it. But again, one of the best strength and conditioning guys and mindset guys, which to me is more important in the world, in America, in California, but in the world right here, Mike Blasquez. And I couldn't have more respect. And let's talk about that mindset. These guys that are coming back, the pros that are coming back to work with you for a reason, right? Anybody can get access to the science. You can go on YouTube and get pretty decent science nowadays, right? There's stuff out there. You can get some really bad stuff too, don't get me wrong. But there's science out there to be had. But the mindset game is really what it comes down to. That's the thing that fascinates me. Whenever I have conversations with people, it's not about how many reps and sets. It's like that, okay, let's check that box. But how do you get your mind right to play? And you're really good at that. Talk to me about the mindset an athlete needs to perform at that high level.
No doubt. And honestly, I think when you see athletes that have that level of success, from the guys we just talked about, all of them, they're competing at the highest level, and then they're succeeding beyond that, all pro and, pound for pound, champs in the Hall of Fame for boxing. I mean, these guys are elites amongst the elites in a lot of cases. Those skills have already been developed with those guys, right? So for me, it's a great opportunity to work with some of those players and understand, okay, what are the qualities that they have that have gotten them to that place? And so you really those really get magnified. But I think, you touched on it. I mean, the mental toughness needed to both prepare and compete, it's a skill. And a skill, implies that it's a trained behavior, right? It's taught, it's trained, and it's tested. And I think that's often missed. I think a lot of times, as coaches, or folks that are judging performance, it's either there or it's not, right? Oh, there's some toughness there. There's the right skill set there, the right mentality there. But too often we forget that those are trained skills. And I'll tell you, going back to my time at De La Salle, is that was an area of emphasis. Technical, tactical, physical, mental preparation. And I will tell you that in Bob Ladder's model for program development, it was a key cornerstone to all of their work that they did, and I would say a key cornerstone to developing the culture that allowed them to succeed. Forget about their record and the streak and the wins, but it set them up for success to develop a culture, a winning culture, where players came in and we got the most out of them individually and collectively from one year to the next. But I think, the first part is, how do you teach it? Mental skills, mental toughness has to be taught. There's some fundamental components to mental skills that need to be learned, and so that needs to be broken down a little bit. And, there's, in my mind, there are 4 or 5 really components to that. And the first component is self-awareness. You have to understand that. You have to understand your mind, where you are, your feelings, your emotions towards something, and become aware of them. And if you do that well, okay, you can understand that sometimes your emotion, what you feel about something, is a great driver to get something done, or it's the opposite of that. It's trying to take you away from what's required to get something done. And so self-awareness is the key fundamental first component.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about that piece, because I think it's really important for people out there to kind of understand what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. When you're fired up for a game and you can create the enemy and you're ready to go and you're pumped, like that's a great mindset, right? Now you're ready to go. Your body's prepared. But there are times when you're trying out new skills, when they're asking you to do something you haven't done before, and all of a sudden that imposter syndrome comes in, right? You start to think, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I handle this. You have those doubts coming in, which are totally normal for people, right? There's an 80% negativity bias for people. Like that's how we survive saber-toothed tigers and T-Rex and everything else. That's built into it. And so that's your nervous system, right? Your autonomic nervous system trying to protect you from exposure, from loss of connection between people. If you're thinking about being embarrassed, like there's a million reasons why your nervous system's like, oh, I got to stop you. And it's worked in the past, so it sees it as a solution. But as an athlete, you've got to be able to push through that stuff. And so I just wanted to frame that a little bit and talk about that as we're moving forward, because I think it's really important for people at home. It's okay to doubt. Everybody doubts themselves all the time, but figuring out how you handle that, now that's the key, and that's where the mental part comes in.
You got it. And the big piece of that is to be able to step away from yourself and identify it. And that's what self-awareness becomes, is saying, oh, wait a minute, I'm scared of where I am at this moment, or this is making me nervous, or, I don't want to do what is in front of me. And I'm identifying that this is this where I'm at with this right now. And step away from yourself and identifying, are you having an emotional driver or feeling that wants to take you away from what's required to get the work done, or something that's taking you to it?
And talk about something that has impact, not just on athletics, but on life in general, right? The ability to stop for a second, take yourself out of whatever emotional place that you're in and analyze it. Like if people could do that more often, just think about how many fights would stop, how much ridiculousness we wouldn't face in the world. Because once you're in an emotional state and your autonomic nervous system takes over, boy, you tend to kind of cascade down that path. And so the ability to do that as an athlete comes back to being present, really, and being able to handle yourself in the moment. Go ahead and go on. I'm just kind of interpreting it. Because you and I have these high-level conversations, right? I was 11-year pro. I won world championships. I was there. And so when we talk, we tend to go. And I love that. And that's that's why I turn to you, man. You're my guy on this stuff. But for people at home, a 14-year-old kid, a quarterback who's playing, frost soft football right now, I want him to get a handle on this as well.
Got you. Yeah, absolutely. No, and point taken, just in that point in becoming very self-aware, that's a trained behavior, right? You have to start all of a sudden thinking about, wait a second, where are my emotions taking me right now? To be able to stop, press pause and say, okay, wait a minute. I don't feel like doing this right now. I'm tired. I'm scared. Whatever it may be. I'm identifying that and then asking yourself this question: is that what I need to do to get the job done? Okay, which brings us to point 2, which is situational awareness. Like, what is required to accomplish what it is that we need to get done? What is the outcome we want to see? Okay, and then what do we need to do to get there? Right, and with the moment of truth in mental toughness is when your emotional state, okay, is trying to take you one direction, and what's required needs to take you in a different direction. Yeah. Okay. Mental toughness is the moment of truth when you stop and say, I don't feel like doing this. Okay. But I know what I need to get done. I'm going to stop. I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to do what's required to get the outcome that I desire.
That is so key. Like that, I have a one tough thing rule where I have to start the day with a tough thing. So every morning I get up at 6 o'clock and I go get in an ice cold pool, right? I do a cold plunge because your body does not want to do that. Like at 6 a.m., your body's like, right? So you feel a little bit of that hesitance. You feel like, maybe I don't have to do it this morning. But I jump in that cold tub for 6 minutes and I feel better to start my day with a workout. Like I face that. I don't want to do it, but I face it. And I think that sets me up for success for the rest of my day. And 100%. That is a learned trait from the years of athletic development. You talked about feeling small, feeling undersized when you were a kid. I had crazy illness, right? I had the cystic fibrosis. I was in the hospital every year with pneumonia. The doctors told my parents on 3 different occasions, if he makes it through the night, he'll probably survive. Right. And so I had horrible lung problems. Wow. So I always felt lesser than laying in that oxygen tent inside a hospital bed. And so I fought that with sports, and my parents, God bless them, greatest parents of all times, right? Like dad was awesome. Mom is incredible. And they said, you're going to go into sports and we're going to build up your lungs and you're going to get stronger. And that's that. And so they put me through it. They helped me develop that mental toughness. And then that's the way I fought through it. So, but doing something that sucks, the SEALs say, learn to love the suck, right?
Right.
Doing something that sucks and getting through it makes you stronger on the far side.
No question. And what you just switched gears into is from teaching mental toughness. We could talk about it all day. Great self-awareness, situational awareness, making a decision at critical moments, defining moments, and there's more, right? But what you're now talking about is training. Okay. And how do you prepare, right? And where's that start? And what are the things you need to do? You talked about getting up, doing something that you don't want to do, right? You wake up in the morning, you go, I know I don't want to hit that cold water.
Right.
I know it's going to hurt. I know I'm tired, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to go do something that, like you said, it sucks, right? It's hard. It's not easy, right? And those are forms of teaching yourself to overcome difficult situations, right? And you do. It's part of the process. And it starts with simple stuff: getting up on time, make your bed, right? Take care of your responsibilities. In a program, it comes back to having standards in that program, and then having accountability to those standards. How athletes carry themselves from a character standpoint as part of your program, and all the details, the attention to detail that's required in all the little things to be part of a program are small components of developing the skill set for mental toughness. Sometimes it's an easy skill set for somebody that their self-awareness is already taken them there. Like they're already definitely like, this is easy for me. Why? Because I believe in doing it. What about doing the stuff that you don't like to do, right? Doing the stuff that's hard for you to do, the things that you're scared to do, or, physically hard to do. Those are the things that really condition your mind and harden your mind. I like to say callous your mind. Like, you lift weights, you callous your hands. You develop thickness of the skin on your hands, and you can all of a sudden start picking up these, bars with these hard knurling, grab them, and all that thickness just protects your skin. Your hands don't get sore anymore. You have to callous your mind, and callousing your mind is general in nature. It's not necessarily specific, and there's specific qualities necessary to have specific, skill sets relative to mental toughness in the game. It's very specific. All right. But there's some general things that you can do to callous your mind and to develop the mental toughness skills with just general things. I'm
going to jump in real quick before you go to those, because I love that analogy, right? Callousing your mind. Like, that's when it no longer becomes a question of, am I going to do this? And it becomes just a matter of fact, this is going to happen. And once this is going to happen, now you start developing strategies to make it happen. When you're still on the fence about whether this is going to happen or not, there's so many ways out, right? There's wiggle room in there. But as an athlete, as a human being in life, if you say, well, this is going to happen, now your mind starts processing a different problem. It's not, how do I get out of getting in the coal tank? It's not, how do I get out of running these hundreds? It's now, how do I successfully do this at the peak of what I can do? And that's a big mind shift.
Right. It's a conscious decision is what it is. And you hit it. It's a mindset. It's making the decision that you're going to do those things before you don't. It's making the decision that I have a heck of a time waking up before 7 a.m. All right. But I'm up every day at X time, and I'm going to pop out of bed, and I'm not hitting the snooze button, and I'm going to get up and I'm going to start my day in a certain way. And I've made the decision that I'm going to do that, and I'm giving an example of something that you would, maybe encourage for a young person, a young athlete, maybe that struggles in this area. Start with the simple stuff, and it's like any other skill set. You want advanced skill set and mental toughness, ability to overcome difficulty and challenge in a competitive environment, in an elite competitive environment, but you can't get up on time. Okay. Get out of bed, or your mom and dad have to wake you up, or, you run late every day, or all the other simple things that require a mindset and an agreement with yourself that you've already made the decision to do what is uncomfortable to do. And so there's some basic training there that can help start to develop that mindset. and start callousing the mind so that you can get to those more challenging situations and more specific situations down the road in training.
Yeah. So kind of to that end, I was always a night person. When I had my TV production company and we were shooting all of our outdoor stuff, I would edit till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So I hated getting up early because I'd be up late, editing. Because that's when I was kind of in my flow state when there's everything in the house was quiet. There's nothing going on. I was in there by myself. I'd seen hours and hours of film or tape. I'm now kind of lost in it. So I would edit and do that, right? And so here we are fly fishing, or here we are elk hunting, or whatever it is. Now I'm in my flow state and I'm cutting stuff. It's coming to me at night. But come first light, boy, I want to close the coffin lid and sleep like a vampire. I don't want to get up early. And so turning that around and becoming a morning person, getting up at 6 o'clock, was not an easy thing for me because I trained myself for so long to do that. However, when I made that decision, I put in my alarm, when it goes off in the morning, it says time to get up and kick ass, period. Right. Like there's no choice here. It's time to get out of bed. The snooze button is maybe the thing that makes us softer than anything else out there, right? I don't want to get up and snooze. And now all of a sudden we're sleeping in for another 30 minutes. And I think just for a great starter position for young athletes, I think that's a great point. I think that's a great solution for you.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a million of them, right? There's a million opportunities to take on positive, skills in your life that can help you to accomplish your goals. And they're just little things. And really, when you talk about young people, young adults, really life skill is really such a fundamental piece of success in everything that they do, sport and everything, to help develop that skill set, early on with the simple stuff, and like everything else, start slow to fast, start simple to complex. These are the fundamentals to basic mental toughness: attention to detail and working through some things that are not comfortable and that are challenging for you, having the mindset to be able to do it, and then having the accountability to follow that. And sometimes with young kids and as parents, coaches, right, we have to help create that structure, right? There has to be some level of outside accountability, right, to help them to understand that, get them to learn how to create those routines and help themselves to start to begin to hold themselves accountable in some of those critical areas. But I think, you have to, for them to really buy into that, they have to have success, and so, when you create an environment as a coach or a parent and have some accountability, that only works if you're monitoring and holding people accountable. But when someone starts to begin to have some success on their own, pretty soon it becomes self-fulfilling, and hopefully there's a skill that becomes learned at that point.
Well, you kind of touched through like several different major psychological studies through there, right? Carol Dweck on the mindset, developing that, right? You can always learn, you can always improve. So that's a big one. And then Angela Duckworth goes into developing grit, which is doing those hard little things, but doing them consistently over time. And even when you fail, coming back and learning from that and improving and continuing to work, right? So you touched on that. Those are both huge things. And then, Tony Robbins talks about all the time, making that decision. I'm going to make this happen. Let's go. And so now that starts the whole train. And I love that. What are some things, like just talk about athletes in general, what are some things that hold athletes back? We talked a little bit about the imposter syndrome, but talk through that and things that you see, especially now you're working with just super high level athletes. What are things that even hold them back? Because these are really the same things that hold the younger athletes back too.
Yeah, I think maybe slightly different. I think our culture is very different than it was 10 or 15 or even 20 years ago. Certainly when you and I were growing up, and I think there's been a false narrative created around expectations for comfort, and I think in most school settings and in most settings in general in our society, particularly in the society here in the Bay Area, and I'm sure it's similar everywhere all over the country. But I think young people are sold that you should not be uncomfortable. That you're supposed to be comfortable, and if you are uncomfortable, there's something wrong. And if there's something wrong, what folks are encouraging is that you go reach out you go get help. Okay. And don't misread this. I mean, to be able to have resources and help for people that need help are critical. It's critical. It has to be there. I'm one of those resources. So I'm not discouraging that, but to teach young people how to have the skill set to help themselves, to overcome challenge, to work through difficulty, I think is the first step in really creating some resilience in this area. And I think our culture now is really taking a step back to that. We've sold, particularly our young people, that they shouldn't be uncomfortable, that everything should be
If you feel uncomfortable, you're a victim somehow nowadays.
You could be a victim, and by all means, go get help as a first step.
Right. And one of the most important things I learned as a parent with a young kid was sometimes they have to self-soothe, right? That was the big term when our kids self-soothe, learn how to deal with a little bit of adversity and then calm yourself down. Because if you can't regulate your nervous system and your emotional reaction, nobody can. Like, somebody outside is not going to be there for you 24/7. You have to be able to regulate yourself. And I think that's what you're talking about.
I am. And what's interesting with young people and, from children to young adults, it's all about providing that structure, that environment for them. And if you provide, it's like anything else. It's like any other form of training. If we were doing squats and, we doubled your weight, we took somebody that's working out with a couple 100 pounds on the bar, we put 500 pounds on the bar, that would be too complex of a physical environment for them to overcome. It wouldn't be possible for them. So in order for them to adapt to a new stress to get stronger, we need to progressively stress them, progressively challenge them. Okay. And as they begin to develop the strength, they will continue to get stronger. We can progressively continue to stress them until they can get to a point where they can lift something heavy. And, in providing a structure with challenge, it's kind of the same way. You have to have a structure that allows them to be able to succeed. Okay. It's got to be possible, but it's got to be challenging at the same time. If it's too easy, then no adaptation, no change, no reason to do anything different. And if it's too challenging, it's too hard, then there's failure and there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and kids will become discouraged. So, it's about, teaching that, teaching the skill set, but then training. Okay. We talked about training. These are forms of training, providing a challenging environment for those skill sets to be developed. And they've got to be age group appropriate, and they've got to be ability appropriate and within reach, but they've got to be challenging. And I think, that's one of the key variables, I think. And I know it was for me. I've got two daughters. I should put them at the top of the list with, with this topic, but two daughters, both in college, and, raising them is about finding the appropriate, challenge for them at the age of development that allowed them to continue to make progress. And, I feel like, I saw great growth, over a number of years as they became more mature and their skill set developed. I think now you see a lot of college age athletes who are technically and tactically skilled, but they don't have the problem solving abilities, the ability to cope, the ability to deal with the stresses that really require you to have that resilience and mental toughness, and maybe even have it at a higher level in athletics than they do in their ability to problem solve with general life skills. And so, and I think part of that is that, I think we're super saturated with, with the farce that we should be comfortable, that everything should be comfortable. Being uncomfortable, there's something wrong. And when you feel in that way, then you should reach out and someone else will solve that problem for you.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Every now and then you got to have some sand in your crotch and figure out how to get that out, right? There's got to be something that you have to deal with. You kind of boiled down Angela Duckworth's whole premise on grit into that piece. It was absolutely brilliant, which is why I love talking to you about this stuff. And when he mentions that he has two daughters, he has two amazing daughters. Like, both of us, they are perfect. They are wonderful girls, incredibly polite, lovely, and due in part to Mary as well. So I want to give credit where it's due to both you and
give it all to her. She deserves it.
Right. So both of you guys, but did a wonderful job with those girls as well. So
thank you.
That is one of those things that like social media and media in general, right? They're trying to get clicks and they're trying to get viewers and they're trying to hold attention. And if they can tell you what you want to hear, that you are somehow a victim, that you are somehow not at fault, that you are somehow special and that you don't deserve this, like they hold on to viewers, but it gives people a false sense of reality out there, because what happens on social media and in TV isn't real. I've seen it. Even the reality shows are scripted. So like when you go through and you think, oh, well, that's what I should be like. That's what it should be like for me. It's not reality. And it affects young people and athletes. It affects adults that I see all the time too. Like it's just a deleterious effect on us as a civilization.
Another component, no doubt, where you can create yourself and, create an identity without really doing much. And then you look at others that are doing the same and you believe it's real, and it's a tough deal. And then you can also reset, right? So the reset button's easy when it's fabricated reality,
Yeah, no doubt.
So
just open a new account, right?
These are all challenges. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Hit reset.
So we talked a lot, like we've kind of been going that direction, and clearly the mindset is the big key. You and I talked about this. What kind of mindset should an athlete be striving for as they're going today? With that in mind about what society does and everything else, what kind of mindset should they be looking for? What should their goal be?
Right. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's a non-cognitive skills that they got to develop, right? It's about courage. It's about self-discipline. It's about resilience. It's about attention to detail. Those are the skill sets that are required to succeed in these areas. And it's about finding tasks that require those things for you to do, to develop the skill set and then transfer that into your world. So if that's about sports, if you're training as an athlete, at the end of the day, it's great to have some general skills, okay? But then you have to become more specific. So, and probably the best analogy I could give you there is think about maybe an elite operator, a Navy SEAL. You mentioned a Navy SEAL earlier. A Navy SEAL is jumping out of an airplane at 30,000 feet with a rebreather on, okay? And you consider that to be, demonstration of some great mental toughness. Ask that same Navy SEAL to step on a football field at the collegiate level or in the NFL. See how tough they are in that environment. And I think you'd see something completely different, and vice versa. You take, a tailback or an offensive lineman, and, in their environment, they demonstrate some real resilience and some of the non-cognitive skills we just mentioned. Put them up on that 30,000 foot jump and let's see how tough they are there, right? So,
or put them on the business end down range from a rifle and watch them wet themselves, right? Because they don't have the training for that.
100%. And so there's some general qualities here that can be developed, but then there has to be specific qualities developed within the sport, within the area of development. And if you don't do that, then we're really missing the boat. And so there's, those specific areas, if you're talking about physical development and the craft of developing an athlete over time and progression. And I think, you really need to look specifically to really be able to get something out of that.
Yeah. And again, so I'm keeping you on here like for as long as I can, because our conversations are just so good, man. Like I just love talking about this stuff with you. To build the physical, now we're talking, what should young athletes be looking at to build the physical side of it? Now we've talked about the mindset. They've got to do the hard things. They've got to get through those mental hurdles, right? They've got to be able to be present, right? To get over the imposter syndrome or the doubts that come into their mind, get over peer pressure to become the player. On the physical side, actually, before I go there, let's talk about team dynamic, because one of the things that happens in teams is that you get guys who don't want to step up and give a full effort during practice or during weights or whatever else, because they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to have that peer pressure of being practice All-American or those things. But the truly great teams are the teams where everybody can step past that and step around that and actually give their full effort every single play, every single snap, every single practice. It was one of the things I harped on as a player every single day was bringing full attention to this play, to this absolute moment, being present to give your effort here. Because if you do that, the guy across from you has to do that as well. So even if he's having a bad day, you having a good day is going to have to bring him up, and he's going to have to step up his game. And so the team dynamic, though, it is how does an athlete manage that in the team dynamic?
Right. And it's a great point. But I think anytime you start talking about team, you have to take a step back and start talking about team culture. What are the behaviors that are consistent amongst the group, right? There's got to be structure there for that. If you don't have structure for that, then you're kind of hoping, right? You're hoping that one athlete's good behaviors influence another athlete's good behaviors. And at the same time, one athlete's bad behaviors aren't influencing another athlete's good behaviors. So, those challenges are there constantly. And so as coaches, it's about creating a culture where you have some consistency in those behaviors, right? And to do that, you have to identify them, and you have to have standards. And you have to say, this is how we do it here. All right. For us to succeed as a unit, we all need to be on the same page. There's a lot of things that separate us and make us different, but these are the things that make us the same. If you're part of the program, this is the way we do things. Here's our standard for doing them. And we're going to hold everybody accountable, and you're going to hold each other accountable to those standards. And when you start with creating that culture, you have the building blocks to get people on the same page. And I think those standards are also those opportunities to really not force is a bad word, but to expect athletes to be able to have the discipline and that mental, the mental toughness necessary to stay the course in those areas. They become tests along the way. They become, identifying and assessments of athletes' progress individually relative to the collective. And I think that's the cultural piece, establishing that culture, establishing standards in that culture, and having accountability, starting with those who created the culture, maybe your coaches, but always getting to the athletes, holding each other accountable to that, are really, I think, the key foundation for success in a team setting.
Without a doubt. And the coaches have to be accountable for that too, right? You can't just print a mark and say, this is what we're going to do, and then be the guy who doesn't live up to that as well. So you have to be the 100%. Paragon of that they see you. One of my favorite coaches of all time, Mike Daly, in the Arena Football League, and just a fantastic dude, fantastic human being. I still talk to him all the time just because I love the man. And I was going through a contract negotiation, and our GM was being cheap, notoriously cheap. And I told Coach, I said, look, you're going to have to trade me because he's not getting this done. And I considered him, when you're a pro, you become friends with your coaches, so it's a different animal. And I considered him a really good friend. And in his Maryland accent, he says, sorry, partner, got to do what's good for the team, right? Team first. And that was his deal. And I went, well, son of a bitch, here's my guy. But that is the standard, right? Mm-hmm. Team first. Even if it, hurts me, I can't make that allowance for one guy and expect everybody else to live up to that, right? You can't if you've got guys that are, playing for you that are between 9s and 7s, you can't let the 9s slide and expect the 7s not to try to slide too, right? Like a 9 could get away with sliding because he's got talent, he's got speed, he's got whatever. The 7 or the 6 even can't do that. He can't slide. He's got to be there for every workout. Everything's got to be perfect. You got to execute perfectly. And if you let the 9 go, the 6 or the 7 is going to go too. And it moves together. So you have to be a paragon as a coach and a player.
No doubt. And I think there's maybe a little bit of a distinction too between outcome and process. And an athlete that's working to be better at their craft, improve their speed, and maybe not fast enough, right? Is the process right? Because when we're talking about the culture, really that's what I'm talking about is there accountability to that process? Are the choices to do the things necessary to make progress, whether you're there or not? Are those choices being made correctly? Is the discipline, the intangible, the non-cognitive piece there for that? And you may have an athlete that's underperforming, okay, relative to their skills, but they've got the right mindset. Their mentality is right. Their toughness is there, and they're doing the right things. They're just not there yet. And so, I think, when I'm talking about a cultural standard, I'm really, even more focused on process, hopefully leading to, standard and outcome. I mean, obviously we compete to win. I mean, that's why we play. So, and when I outcome, not just winning, but succeeding in all the little pieces along the way. And so I think from a team standpoint, boy, that cultural piece it's just critical. And again, I agree with you. It's got to start with your coaches. Your coaches have to create that. They have to teach it. They have to create an environment where there's accountability and trust. And then at the end of the day, and I'll tell you, with the teams that I've been a part of where we've seen great success, that accountability piece all of a sudden turns around and becomes internal. And athletes start holding each other accountable. And it's pretty interesting. And you asked me maybe some of the things I see different with the higher level athletes that I work with. That's the difference. Put three guys, the three guys that I mentioned that I'm training right now, like they hold each other accountable. I mean, I don't have to do any of that, right? They have that skill set. And if anything, I got to taper them back. I got to say, hold on, no, we're not competing right now. We're going to run rapid fire. Cause I'm going, man, if I let these guys all take off the line at the same time, and they're going to be going, as hard as they can go. And I don't want them to go. They're going. Right? They're going. And so it's, know when you want them to go and let them compete, and know when you don't want them to go and don't let them compete.
Yeah.
It's a different skill set. Yeah.
But it's so true, right? Because I've been on world championship teams. We won, January 1 bowl games. We had great, I've been part of a lot of wins. No matter where I played, I won, period. That's where we were at. I've never been on those teams that won that didn't have that. Like, that didn't have the accountability, that didn't have responsibility to each other, and the loyalty. Right. Like, it's not just accountability, it's loyalty. It's right. I owe this to you, not just I'm going to uphold what it's not like contractual law. It is, there's an emotional tie to that, which makes a huge difference. And that energy that the team builds with that kind of environment is really something special. Our team in the Arena League got voted the greatest team in the history of the Arena League, right? And it was because we had that together. Everybody was there holding everybody accountable. Right. But at the same time, everybody was expected to be accountable themselves, and they held that themselves. So that kind of environment is just an amazing thing. And as a player, if you can help foster that, it's pretty special.
Well, and in your situation, as a quarterback and as a leader, you're the catalyst for that. And I'm sure you were the catalyst for those teams. You're coming in with that expectation and setting that standard internally in the locker room when no one else is looking. And that's one thing is, being part of a team, everybody knows everything about each other.
Everybody.
In that locker room, it's just, there's really no hiding, and so, as coaches, we find out about things later, but never before the guys find out about themselves. And so it's always a case of what's going on internally. And again, I think great coaches, they create that environment. They create the medium for it, right? They teach it, they train it, create it, and then they hold people accountable to it. And going back to De La Salle, Bob last year was one of the greats. I mean, he did that. I mean, there was a system in place for that process, and it worked. And the best teams that we had over the years, they were the best at that. They were the best at creating the internal culture and the internal accountability on those teams. And we had amazing stories of teams that we would go outside and call them practicing on their own. I'm talking about practicing football. Running plays and running drills. Or you guys can't do that. Now, this is high school. You can't just come out here and practice football without coaches out here.
Right.
But just a testament to the leadership and that you had kids on the team that understood the big picture, right? And were willing to hold each other accountable to that high standard and then, make good decisions around the right behaviors to help them win. And anyways, that's, from a team setting, so critical.
So critical. And you don't get to be Bob Ladouceur, right, without that ability. He's just, he's a special dude, period. And he's not, like, people think about a football coach that does that, yeller, screamer, the whole, like, Bob's not that guy. Bob is a smart guy. Terry will get after your ass now. Don't get me wrong, but Bob, like, he will talk you through it and he will teach you through it. And I think that was his biggest strength, kind of with what he did and with his staff that he had around him. I think you guys were all great at that. Right. Finally, final thoughts, kind of a mindset for athletes, parents, really, when we talk about all these things for athletes, this is for Gen Pop too. This is general population for people out there. You want to improve your situation in life, take these lessons that we're talking about for athletics and apply them to your life, because you're going to get better if you apply these things, do the hard things, get through that self-doubt, right? Face it, be able to remove yourself from it. Quick story on that front. I used to do something goofy. Like if I felt nervous and I started feeling that imposter syndrome or I can't handle it, it's coming up, I would look back over my shoulder to make sure there was no T-Rex behind me, because I knew once I did that, I'd be in the ridiculous, and I'd get that smile back. And as soon as I smile, the confidence comes back and I take myself out of that fear into the moment. And now I can make that rational decision to go forward. Yeah. So that was kind of one of my coping strategies for that pressure, the anxiety, the fear in the moment. Right. But now talking about athletes going forward, what mindset should they be striving for, kind of as our closing thought here?
Yeah. To be able to take on whatever's in front of you. I mean, that's the mindset you want. Whatever's thrown my way, I've got the skill set to be able to figure this out, problem solve it, and succeed. That's the outcome that you're looking for. That's the mindset that you have, that you'd like to see in your athletes, that they could they walk around with the confidence that they have the ability to do that. And it's not a perfect process. That doesn't mean that they got answers for everything or the physical ability to accomplish everything that they want to, but they have the confidence that whatever's put in front of them, whether it's challenging or not, that they can work through it and are willing to work through it. They're willing to embrace the productive discomfort necessary to do that, right? There's going to be successes and failures along that process, but stay the course, get back up, keep working, and eventually that they're going to get done what they want to get done. And so that's what that's the outcome we're hoping for. I think the challenge is that, and maybe understanding society, it's understanding that, one, you're not born with it. And two, your coach, your parent, the program, the workout that I just sent you isn't the answer, right? That's part of it. That's great. That's help. Okay. But it all starts within, right? And it's having the skill set, the mindset to be able to take on the challenge from a day-to-day basis, embrace productive discomfort necessary to get the work done, and then go do the work. And I don't think it'll ever change. There's no way around that. The science, the technology, all the great things that are out there that help us in a lot of ways, aren't going to help you in those areas. So I think from a mindset, that's, from an outcome to a process standpoint, that's what I'd suggest.
And by the way, for everybody at home, you're welcome. Like you just sat through a master class in an athlete, like how to get your mind right with one of the best dudes in the world at doing this. This is why I love talking to you, brother. This is why, I love you. Just the mentality of it. We get in the same room and I'm ready to walk out and run through a wall. So like, you always put me up. You always get my mind right. And I really appreciate you. Thank you for coming on with me here today. People at home, you got so much out of this.
Well, thank you for having me. And from a guy that's lived it and succeeded at the highest level as an athlete, that means a lot. I really appreciate it. As always, great conversation with you. Look forward to the next one.
Always great. Thanks, brother. For everybody at home, again, that was a great class for you. Put this into your daily life. Put these, whether you're an athlete or not, put these thoughts into your daily life, and you will watch your performance improve at whatever you're doing. It is great for you. I appreciate you guys being here today. Got to hear from a great one of my true good friends, Mike Blasquez, who has the credentials and clearly has the mindset for it. I will talk to you guys again soon.